Martha stood in front of the United Nations to tell them about how the dreadnought insurrection had been put down. In 2094, Earth had been at peace with the enemy from deep space who had attacked us for 50 years. When Zebu Me and Zia Ganza were two graduate students at the University of Chicago when they got the opportunity of a lifetime. They were hired to work for Martha Dragworther, the noted scientist who 50 years before with her husband, now passed, Jim Dragonworthy, had cracked the code of the captured alien dreadnoughts that had decimated our world and reprogrammed them to fight for Earth. And it worked. The first time a reprogramming attempt by us of one of the alien dreadnoughts had been successful. Earth Defense Forces, together with the captured dreadnought that was now fighting for us, was able to slow down the advance of the enemy, and long enough for humanity to either adapt for use or to reverse engineer all of the component parts of the captured dreadnought, one of which was a weapon we do not yet understand, but that the enemy feared. It was a type of atomic laser, a kind of light sound that appeared harmless enough. We couldn't figure it out, but the effect on the enemy was startling. So to increase the power of the weapon, we shot it through a crystal klystron, a sort of focusing chamber of crystals to boost the its strength, the laser in the atomic laser's strength, and with that focusing chamber of crystals added to it, the weapon cut through the enemy like butter. The enemy did not know what hit them, and once we used it, the war for the most part was over. When we first recovered what we now call an atomic laser, we did not know what it was or what it did, just like most of the objects we had taken from the enemy. And one of the teams working on these recovered objects from either the battlefield or from a crashed ship, in an attempt to get this object to work, attached a crystal chamber to it, sort of like a crystal klystron, to serve as a resonator for it, and the effect was quite startling. The ships we shot it at either collided with each other or crashed and burned. What was it doing to them, the unseen enemy within? We were never quite sure, because as the last act of their thinking ships, it would flash fry the internals of the ship to remove any and all organic material from within the ship. So we never knew what the enemy looked like. We always negotiated through their dreadnoughts that looked just like us. After their deep space, long-range, trans-space warships were destroyed, the enemy did not want any part of us or that weapon. In fact, it was a weapon, and even after we began to build our own versions of their weapons, that weapon remained elusive to reverse engineering, to our attempts at reverse engineering. Thousands of teams, all acting independently of each other, achieved the impossible. We re-engineered the dreadnought, and then fashioned all of the reverse-engineered pieces together to build a totally Earth-built dreadnought that we named the Earth Defense Bot, that became known as Human Ds. And with this new army of Human Ds, as they were called, we were not only able to halt the enemy's advance, but to counterattack and smash through the enemy lines and drive them back into deep space. And at long last we were able to achieve peace with the enemy, a peace that has held for 50 years. And now Zebu Me and Zia Ganzu were working for Martha Dragonworther herself, who along with dearly departed husband were considered the Einsteins of robotics. and they were now a part of one of a handful of groups of human scientists around the world working independently as well as together, trying to reverse engineer as well as reprogram the enemy's crashed or captured ships, just as Martha and her husband had done with the dreadnoughts, and use them to take the fight to the enemy, to track them back to their home world and invade their world like they had done to ours 50 years earlier. And now in her 90s, Martha still worked in her basement lab on a photonic computer language that she was developing to work in concert with a computer, an infinity computer that her husband was working on, and that one day would her language would one day run on her departed husband's infinity computer, and that was just sitting gathering dust in the basement of her home since he passed. But that part of the project had stalled, but she was still working on the language. She never gave up on that. So she had agreed to work on this new field of carbon glass computing, a material that we had lifted from alien spaceships that we thought was a new type of plastic before we stumbled upon its computing capabilities. And beyond simple basic functions, we have yet to get its higher functions working. Martha believed that the photonic language she was working on would solve the incompatibilities of our systems with the plastic glass and get them to start working together. She knew it needed a governor or a focusing agent of some type. If she could only talk to one of the aliens. That was just a dream. That was just wishful thinking. Then one day it hit her. A cybernetic interface that her husband had developed for his infinity computer. She thought there was a chance she might be able to adapt it to connect with this plastic glass. Maybe the dreadnoughts in the ship were a single organism. Why not? So she had to construct the captured alien architecture down to nearly an atomic level. This was a massive undertaking, and one she knew that she'd never be able to complete. Her job was simply to capture and convey a vision and establish a direction, and it would be for others to bring that vision to fruition. So she focused on the language, and her two assistants were put in charge of focusing on the interface that was a part of her husband's infinity computer, and trying to get that to integrate that with the plastic glass computing. During the war, Jim and Martha Dragonworth had been two scientists working on reprogramming the enemy dreadnoughts when they had a breakthrough in perception. The dreadnought wanted to be human. So that is how they approached it, as physical therapists trying to help a patient to recover its language skills. So it let them in. They began to study its inner architecture and memory. It was one of the infiltrated dreadnoughts that the enemy had sent to infiltrate human communities, so that when the enemy is attacked from space, they were in a position on Earth, already embedded among us, to inflict maximum damage to our defense capabilities from within. They looked just like us, men, women, and children, who were in actuality killing machines, dreadnoughts. The captured dreadnought that Jim and Martha had been given looked like a young woman of college age. She was heavily damaged, but not beyond repair, and believed herself to be Osasaninji, from Nigeria, an international college student. Its cyber brain was encased in a membrane made of what looked like a plastic glass. It was believed that membrane was something that protected the cyber brain from the dreadnought's own antibodies, so it was considered unimportant. We were wrong because once we removed it and replaced it with a simple plastic membrane, the old programming never reasserted itself again. It was gone for good. And the first thing that Martha and Jim did when they succeeded in reprogramming her was to rename her Kendra.